Now, back to our electricity issues. As rolling power cuts continue, experts are taking a closer look at their impact on our lives. Psychologists say persistent power cuts could lead to depression and anxiety. To delve deeper on this, we are joined by psychologist Lerato Mokgethi. Thank you very much, Lerato, for your time here on eNCA. Now, firstly, for me at least, I would be stressed because I'm looking at the fact that we have this increase that is supposed to be implemented in April, but I don't get electricity for 10 hours in a day. So what am I paying for? So that alone is enough to make me feel very anxious, which is also, a mental illness.
Thank you, Masego. The psychology of our country is at stake. If you are like most people, uncertainty causes tremendous anxiety, and load shedding comes with a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability, anger, frustration, hopelessness, and powerlessness, irritability, and disillusionment. And these frequent loss of basic services such as electricity, it contributes to mental health conditions such as anxiety. And we know that the association between darkness and depression is well established, and prolonged exposure to darkness results in common neurotransmitters associated with compromised emotional regulation and pleasure. So these rolling blackouts, Masego, are synonymous to crime, loss of income, loss of basic resources for many, many households. And I think what is also significantly worrying with load shedding is the failing infrastructure where residents go days without power.
And I mean, Lerato, for me also the issue here is it doesn't matter what we do, how much, we tell government that this is not fair, etc. We've even started to have our favorite schedules of load shedding where we start discussing how we hate the 6 to 10 p.m. Schedule. We'd rather have the 12 to 4 p.m. because we're at work, etc. What's even more frustrating is that it doesn't look like there's any solution. We have a government that's telling us there's nothing they can do.
That's correct, which I think also it ripples into that load shedding isn't just an individual problem, it's a collective problem, irregardless of even making attempts to cope better, to even plan around your schedule or your predicted time that you are meant to be off. There's constant things that residents or households need to adapt to, so it never seems to be enough.
And psychologically, how does this impact young people? I mean, I was speaking to a guest earlier today because I read the letter that some of the civil society organizations and political parties have sent to the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, and they mention a very compelling argument in terms of the fact that they're infringing on our constitutional rights. And one of those is the right to proper education, because then schools don't have proper sanitation, because things don't start pumping well, etc., because there's no electricity. Pupils aren't able to study because, they don't have natural light coming into their classrooms. And so that when the electricity goes off, schooling stops for the day. How does this then impact, for instance, pupils who are trying to just get through school?
Yes, Masego. I mean, schools just opened and learners are struggling just to get by, just to do their homework. And I think it's also important to note that people react differently to uncertainty. For example, those with a higher intolerance to uncertainty, they may be less resilient and more prone to mental health condition. And I think specifically with learners, especially as the matric results are about to be released, you find that learners have to make do with the most basic resources. It's extremely difficult, and not all households can even afford candles for learners to study. It's very frustrating.
Do you know what the cost is of mental health in South Africa? We have been, told as a country by the WHO that we're one of those countries that actually don't take care of people with mental illness. We don't take this quite seriously. So what is the cost to the country, really? Especially now that you're mentioning that load shedding will just make things worse.
I can't put a figure to it, Masego, but your normal middle-income household cannot afford mental health services. I mean, if you look at how many people, even in the past with, I don't know if I can even say the past, with a crisis like COVID, how many people required mental health services, but they are not accessible, they're not affordable. And if you have medical aid, you are one of the few in South Africa who are able to access mental health services.
But also even that, I mean, Lerato, for me, I remember when I covered the Life Esidimeni tragedy, there are those who, for instance, said that they started to afford private mental health, but at some point the private institutions would then tell them that they need to go to government because if it becomes chronic, it becomes too expensive.
That's completely true. Medical aid funds run out for chronic and for even your individuals who are diagnosed with your depression. I mean, if you are diagnosed with any mental health condition, you require, I don't want to say lifelong, but you require constant mental health services. You require to see your professional, for example, it's January throughout the year. So it's not a once-off quick fix, but it's a service that is required. It's a basic need for most individuals, for households, for employees as well.
And it's quite a difficult one, Lerato, because I mean, mental health can lead to death because people can even get things such as heart attacks because they're thinking so deeply about the uncertainty that we face as a country. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That was psychologist Lerato Mokgethi, who was speaking to us there about the impact of load shedding on our mental health.